Ta-da! Here we go. Jazz hands to start the show. You know it's going to be a fun show. And Bloom, you know I'm fired up because it's the scouting combine this week. And I head out to Indianapolis tomorrow on Tuesday to be there all week. But, brother, we got to preview some NFL news and notes, including combine news today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And the combine isn't just about the draft. It is mostly about the draft. But the wheels turn, right? Antonio Brown wheels turn. Who knows what other wheels are turning, and the plate tectonics always in motion.
Always in motion, and now properly weighed. Before, again, we jump into the news items, Bloom, I've often said this. I said this on the air in Denver today. I'm like, we need to know how to properly weigh the combine. This is dotting I's and crossing T's. It's not discovery. God forbid it should be discovery. But what it is, it's like, okay, you saw this on film. You've graded these players. Now, how does that match up? Does the speed match what we saw? Is he a little bit slower? Is he a little bit faster? Like, has he really trained for this? The combine has become so specialized. And I think because of that specialization, Bloom, NFL teams should know that this is what, less than 5% of your grade, less than 1% of your grade, whatever it is. I think it's small, but it is kind of a confirmation that we're going to see this week in Indy.
There's always an overreaction to data, I guess, but it's data that measures something we already have a lot of knowledge about. Everybody always says the same thing about the combine sees. Medicals, interviews, the two parts that we are blind, basically.
Right.
You know, medicals, interviews. And then there's the actual drills. And I do think from an evaluation standpoint, when you watch these guys do the same thing one after another, it does help to like at the All-Star game practices. It helps to separate players at a point in time when we have to, with rankings, make separation that can be somewhat meaningless. I mean, really, you might say, I like these 3-4 guys all about the same. And at the combine, we can also isolate individual players and say there's specific things, especially small school players, where they need to hang. But you're right. What they do on the field, as much as we'll make out of it, and that's maybe not the, I wouldn't say it's the main purpose, but maybe the product that comes out for us is just gives us stuff to talk about. It gives us ways to delineate between the players in a hard way, where just watching the players should have already done that.
Well, the NFL will love it. Gives us something to talk about, Bloom. So that people talk about the Robert Kraft thing. Well, again, this is a combine show, but this is the biggest news story that's out there, Bloom, when Patriots owner is caught in a human trafficking ring, going to to Orchids of Asia spa in Florida. Quickly, so we can get to the combine, brother.
Yeah.
Just your thoughts on this. I mean, we've seen teams in the NBA and the NFL kind of take teams away in a way. I'm sure there'll be a fine. I'm sure they'll let the legal process go, and all of this is allegedly, of course, but sounds like a pretty cut and dried case. I read it today, parts of it anyway. And it seems like we're going to see some discipline from the league, whatever that is.
There should be, and that's just fair on one level. Maybe the deeper fair, which we can't really even explore, is the cartel of the 32 owners, right? And Robert Kraft is, I think, still pretty well situated in that group. I don't think we're going to see anything happen to him like what happened to Jerry Richardson. I think that it should be treated the same way as if a player didn't protect the shield, tarnished the shield. This absolutely tarnishes the shield. If in part because it was ridiculed at first, and that's not the emotional reaction after you learn about the human trafficking element and it becomes more clear what this operation was about, and should applaud the people in law enforcement that are doing these kinds of operations and pushing back against this. And human trafficking is something that, just for the conversation to pause for a second and think about, that could be a good byproduct of this. But I don't think you're going to see anything too harsh. And hopefully it's a reminder that Irsay recently too, the owners have to stay in line too.
Right. And that's something that's come out from this as well, saying, well, the NFL just make the shield look bad, owner, player, coach, whatever. That's what happens. Now, what happens at the scouting combine this week, and I think the most to gain or most to lose in this process could easily make the argument that it's Kyler Murray. And if the reports are true from Sports Illustrated, that he's going to step on a scale and weigh 206 pounds. I think the short thing is a conversation that's dead. Hopefully, Bloom. Hopefully, it's dead in the NFL. We're like, oh, short guys can't play quarterback. Well, he's short, exceptionally short. But I think it's the weight. I think it's the lack of body armor. I know my biggest concern with Kyler Murray, I don't worry about his arm. I don't worry about his ability to make off-platform throws. I don't worry about his ability to scramble. I do think he abandons the play too soon and looks to run too soon. It's a different conversation. But I'm really concerned about his lack of body armor. He's a little guy, not short, but just not. If he's 185 pounds, how's that guy going to last in the NFL? If he's 205 pounds, 206 pounds. By the way, Russell Wilson at his combine Bloom was 204 pounds. I think that is we're going to be watching the scale in that one instance for that one player who could go. My first mock draft came out today, Bloom.
Yeah.
I hope you saw it. I had the Dolphins taking Kyler Murray. He could go from that to number one if he's at 206 pounds. And that sounds ridiculous to some, I'm sure. But it's that body armor question with Kyler Murray that is swirling around.
And that's what he can do to address it. And that's what we'll learn at the combine. And earlier in the cycle, and see, it just shows you how quick the washing machine works. Because it was just a week or two ago that we were talking about, well, he looks unprepared, ask these questions.
Right, at the Super Bowl.
Not a good look. That was the latest thought about him. Then he committed to football. We said someone told him he's going in the first round. Now he can really get the things going in a positive direction by coming in weighing 205, 206, like you said, and show that he's going to address that question. And look, if the biggest question about Kyler Murray is, can he hold up? Can he be durable in the NFL? But you're not questioning his ability to play at a quarterback position where we don't have 32 guys that can play. That's a risk worth taking in the first round.
That is a risk worth taking in the first round. And it's one thing, like, I don't care if he throws. I know Drew Lock's going to throw. Yeah. That's, what I don't even need to see Drew Lock throw.
No.
Because this isn't football. Like,
right.
I'm going to the combine. It's been like a decade now. I've been going to all the combines and like, okay, I love it. I love this process. It's not football. For me, it's just confirmation. And I want to know, what's the medical say? What do the interviews say? What can we possibly learn? It's an intelligence gathering function for my purposes anyway. I don't need to see Drew Lock throw, and I don't care that Kyler Murray's not throwing.
No, we want to see those things in a football context, like you say. What I think the combine can be good for as a viewer is, when you're watching the drills, having the linebacker drop into coverage, and you just see the way guys' different hips flip differently, or how quickly their bodies can react to change of direction. The gauntlet for wide receivers, you just see what they do when they don't even have time to think about it, and it reveals little things. And you can start to, like I said, sort and separate. But see, you're right. I mean, this is something where we're just taking little things at the margin. You're not really learning about players. You're just adding a point of detail to what you already know.
Adding that point of detail, and then also trying to gather information about free agents. I mean, there's a lot of that has to fall first before the draft. We're going to get to know the players more or talk to the players. And with a record number of underclassmen coming out, I mean, I don't see the juniors at the Shrine Game. Don't see the juniors, or hardly any, at the Senior Bowl because they're not allowed. So it's kind of a get-to-know-you process. But with the way everyone's prepared for this, Bloom, even during the interview process, and we've been privy behind the scenes, both of us, to kind of know how these guys are coached up. How are teams supposed to cut through that?
I think, honestly, teams are going through their own evaluation processes and their own intelligence gathering processes now, and there's still a lot of cloak and dagger, and there's still a lot of things where they're being affected by narratives that we would find even silly at times, and they're still sorting all of these things out. And we're always going to be on the outside of that, and they're always going to be affected by things that we usually don't think are possible.
And as we look to the scouting combine this week, are there any players for you in particular, outside of Kyler Murray, that you'll be monitoring or looking for a 40 time? I mean, for me personally, and Mike Pritchard and I talked about this today, it's like, okay, DK Metcalf, how do you look? Because you're really big, and you're like David Boston big, but are you rigid? Are you able to, catch passes, arms extended away from your body? Do you look smooth? I think the biggest knock on DK Metcalf, who I have number 9 going to the Bills, is the fact that he can't get separation. I don't look at him to get separation, though. I look at him to win at the catch point, which he does regularly. Now, routes on air, you're not going to see that. But for me, I just want to see how he moves. How does he look? Is he too rigid? Is he too bulky? That's one player for me, Bloom. Does anyone jump out for you?
No, I think that this is a good time to think about wide receivers in general. That's a position where we can start to separate guys based on, like you said, a specific question. I think you're right to say that DK Metcalf's going to blow up the combine numbers wise. I care more about watching how he moves with this more bulked up frame. Jalen Hurd from Baylor is, I was hoping he was going to be at the Senior Bowl because of the conversion at wide receiver. Where is he at? That's still a projection. And physically, how does he compare to some of the other big wide receiver prospects? Because I think athletically, he's as fluid and explosive as you would want. Not on DK Metcalf's level, but a player that projects as a factor in the NFL. And I watched JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and I see a more linear athlete. And I see someone that maybe in terms of testing, some of that might show. And also, if we watch players in these drills, some of that might show. And wide receivers like him fell last year. The little bit stiffer, the contested ball specialist, straight line runners, build up speed. That wide receiver doesn't seem to be as valuable in the NFL anymore.
As we look to the scouting combine, we also have to look to the news we're going to get out there. Again, you mentioned it in the opening, Bloom. There's Antonio Brown. What's the latest we're hearing there on Brown, his possible destinations? I think the latest we had on our newswire was like, they're going to ask a lot for him.
Yeah.
Well, yes, water is wet, and they are going to ask a lot for him. Are they going to get it, Bloom?
I mean, I want to hope, Cease, emotionally, and it was don't cross the moats, by the way. Who was it that was asking? Jason was asking. Arthur Moats. It's actually 26 shirts. Great people. All Bills Mafia. I'm emotionally tied. We were going to go to Canton when Antonio Brown went in. It was going to be a Swan, Stallworth, Hines Ward, this great line of Steelers receivers in the Hall of Fame. Right. And now that's tainted. So I want it to be a good price because just of what he represents as a Hall of Fame player, still in the tail end of his prime. Really, he should be garner with a reasonable contract. Really, he should garner a first plus. Forget about off the field clubhouse stuff. New team, new start. He'll be embraced. I think players will want to play with someone like Antonio Brown on any team, except the Steelers. Now that trust has been broken. So you wanted to. I'm hoping for a second. And the psychology you want is that you want another team out there. Like, I hate to say it because the Steelers shouldn't trade him to the Patriots, right? I don't care, even if they make the best offer. Don't trade him to the Patriots. But that's the kind of team that will realize what value he represents towards the goal of winning the Super Bowl. So, the Colts, the Bucks, Bruce Arians. We hope that psychology realizes how rare players like Antonio Brown shouldn't ever change teams. And here's that moment. But the teams also know they have the Steelers over the barrel in terms of negotiating, and they might lowball him. They can play up this clubhouse cancer kind of stuff. I don't know what's going to win out in the end. I still think the Steelers want to try to posture like they may just turn down all the offers if they're all too weak, which could be disastrous. But if I was running this show, Cease, that's probably where I would end up steering it.
Didn't they handle the Le'Veon Bell thing in a disastrous manner? I mean, don't know. I don't know who comes out on top. I guarantee you the Steelers won't.
Well, it already happened.
They
got here in the first place.
Yeah, and
we're already on the rocks. The ship is on the rocks. The plane has hit the mountain.
Here we are, and our man Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report, love that guy, showed you and I around our first Senior Bowl years and years ago. Scott came out and reported like, hey, maybe the Steelers could trade for Deshaun Jackson. Well, with this money situation and taking a $21 million cap hit, and I get it, they're going to lose Antonio Brown. They have to look for someone with juju, and maybe that's Deshaun Jackson. I think he ends up one cut, so you don't have to trade for him, and two, probably back with Philadelphia. Bloom, we can talk about that, but like, I don't know. I don't see the Steelers being a player because they can't be, especially eating $21 million in cap space.
We're just going to turn this into the gripe session,
The Steelers, grumpy Steelers fans.
Because you're right. Because if without all of this stuff that has happened publicly, the idea of a team going to the Steelers and trying to obtain Antonio Brown wouldn't make any sense. Why would a team take a $21 million cap hit to let go of Hall of Fame players still in the tail end of his prime at a reasonable price? It doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, try to bowl me over, but that's not in my interest. That move is not in my interest. So you're right. It definitely limits what the Steelers can do. Thankfully, wide receiver is a position that they seem to evaluate really well. It's another wide receiver, deep position. I think there are players that can contribute right away in this class. So I think that's what they're going to have to rely on. James Washington taking a big step, Juju, and maybe finding a underrated veteran, or maybe someone like Eli Rogers finally can contribute. At this point, they're stuck. They're not going to get Deshaun Jackson. And Deshaun Jackson is a player that still may talk himself out of Tampa.
But they're going to keep Jesse James.
Oh.
Maybe, according to Kevin Colbert. I'm like, oh, man, I mean, no offense to Jesse James, but you want to be looking for an upgrade. And by the way, look over the free agent tight ends outside of Jared Cook, who's Mr. Inconsistency. I mean, it's garbage. Right. So if you're a guy like Jesse James, you might want to hit the open market because you might get a little bit of a payday.
Well, what did we've seen these contracts to mediocre. What did Jermaine Gresham get? 17 or 18 million or something like that. I don't remember. I mean, Deion Sims got like a 3-year, $18 million deal from Chicago and had barely done anything. The draft, again, it's another great class. Daniel Jeremiah, Audible alum, saying today this is a great class, one of the best classes we've seen. This is a draft where you go after tight end. Maybe sees Hawkinson is in the top 10 this year. I think maybe leading the charge and the top 100 with as many as 8, 9, 10 this year.
It should be. Honestly, I had him at 8 going to the Lions. Like, you're going to let go of Eric Ebron. Matt Patricia wants to find his Gronk. And I guess if they're going to keep Matthew Stafford, Bloom, they got to do something to put better weapons around him. And that doesn't mean bringing back Golden Tate.
The Detroit is the team that needs everything. I wish I was wearing that throwback Lion shirt that I have. The team that needs everything. So you just take a good football player. I mean, when you get a top 10 pick, isn't that what you do? Isn't that what Buffalo has had trouble doing, always being at 8, 9, 10, is taking that player who's a culture setter, who's a tone setter for your offense or your defense, an entire unit that is adding value in multiple areas of the game, and just get a good football player. That's TJ Hawkinson.
It is the Audible here, reacting to the chat room, who's reacting to us. What's up, everybody out there, including our guy Mookie, listening to you guys while forklifting.
Oh.
You ever driven a forklift, Bloom?
No, and that would only comic things would ensue, except for the person whose property I damaged.
Forklifting is pretty damn fun. Anyway, what's also fun is wondering where Le'Veon Bell's going to go. I know, what was there, a tweet or Instagram, whatever, post, like, thinking about Philadelphia. Philadelphia would be cool. Philadelphia has $2 million in cap space.
Yeah.
So Le'Veon Bell can hope and dream and wish that he could go to the Eagles, but how in the hell are they going to do anything? They're not.
Look, this Nick Foles situation, they're going to cap him and tag him and trade him.
How can they do that, though?
Yeah,
how can they do it? Because he could sign it immediately, thus demanding that payment.
Yeah, exactly. So you won the Super Bowl. Now things are hamstrung. And look, the market for Le'Veon Bell is not going to be very good, I don't think. I think the Le'Veon Bell camp hopes to play off two organizations against each other. But if there's not two organizations that are convinced that Le'Veon Bell can alter the direction of their franchise, because it's going to have to be that big of a signing to give him like 30 or 40 million, what he's looking for. There may not even be one. The Jets and the Bucks, I guess. I mean, that's your dream scenario. Maybe there's a team out there that's been coveting him that we wouldn't anticipate, but some of the stuff he's done with suspensions and just his public persona, this idea that he's fallen out of shape, which, what are you going to get when you sign Le'Veon Bell now? He's going to get less money than David Johnson, I think, and he's going to, from a financial standpoint, look like the big loser here.
It is the Audible Live as we are tying a bow on today's program, talking a little NFL news and notes here before the Combine. Our man Daniel Jeremiah, again, Audible alum and friend of the show, talked about Devin Singletary, Bloom. If there's one back, and I can't wait, we're going to do our live shows with Matt Waldman and some Dr. Gene Bramall appearances as well. Those start in March. So what, like next week, Bloom? Is that right? Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
Next Thursday night, we'll be starting the live show up again, and I really want to pick Matt's brain about Devin Singletary, because if there's one player who I find myself talking about time and time again, it's Devin Singletary from FAU. And Daniel Jeremiah said there's a little LaShawn McCoy to his game. I like the sound of that. I also like the fact that he had over 1,000 yards after contact this year for, what is that, the Owls, Bloom? Is that right? FAU, Florida Atlantic.
That sounds right.
The Owls. So is there anyone your pre-combine just like, man, I hope this guy runs well, or I hope to see this guy, or is there anyone you find yourself talking about often? Because I think and Devin Singletary is not a big back. You know how I am with big backs.
Yeah.
But he's a 200-pound back. And I'm like, okay, maybe a little Philip Lindsay bump. I know people say, oh, he's a mid-round guy. Yeah, okay, sure. Maybe second round. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, I've got my favorites for sure. And Singletary is an interesting one. And see, I think of, I mentioned this already, I think of Singletary and Travion Williams in a similar bucket, So I want to see how they look compared to each other. And I like them as far as those undersized backs that have the burst to make a difference. And then something else, like you said, with Singletary, it's breaking tackles. With Williams, it's pass blocking. Of course, it's wide receiver. I have a lot of fun with wide receiver. And I love Penny Hart. I think he's the best of the slot types. Maybe he might not have quite the long speed of Andy Isabella, but he looks like a much more mature route runner already. I wish I could see how he's going to stand out, but they didn't invite him to the combine. Divine Zigbo from Nebraska.
Didn't invite him to the combine.
Yeah, I mean, and these
Jimmy
are
Moreland, who's a cornerback from James Madison, and the best player at the Shrine Game, in my opinion. Zigbo was good too, but like that guy's not invited to the combine. I'm like, didn't you learn from Philip Lindsay?
Yeah.
Like, who in the hell's in charge of this? And Dries Fountain last year too.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, a guy I like to talk about who I want to see is Dax Raymond, the tight end out of Utah State. We're back to Utah State again after that run of running backs they had, and he looks like a really solid, polished two-way tight end. And I really think, again, starting with Hawkinson, that tight end is an important tactical position. I'm going to say this over and over again. People are going to get tired of hearing me say this, Cease, but I think offense is about having guys that can do more than one thing well and being able to put defenses at a disadvantage when you see their personnel, when you see their alignment, when you see their formation, and know that, because this player is inevitably going to either be able to blot someone out in a tight end as a blocker effectively, or get open for a chunk play as a receiver. And I think that Raymond, he's not TJ Hawkinson, but I think he can still be that kind of element in an offense.
The Audible Live, ready to go to Indy tomorrow. Going to be a good time. Be out there until Sunday. So Bloom, we will have to do a post-combine show as well. Just kind of go over everything that we're going to learn this week. Any albums?
Album
of the week time.
It's carnival time in New Orleans, by the way.
Yeah, Bloom was telling me, by the way, off air, about all the interesting things going on with Mardi Gras. And I guess the first week is not as intense as the second week. Is that right?
It's the warm week. And this is, I did Mardi Gras back in 98, and it has an epic story that involves like jail and lawyers that work out of the trunk of their car and all kinds of things.
I just ordered the D. Snyder cup off of eBay, by the way, that you gave me an alert to.
Are you a Twisted Sister, or just as metal memorabilia, basically?
I love Twisted Sister. Loved them back when I was growing up.
Well, and of course, Twisted Sister, I'll give them something, because we're not going to take it as like a protest anthem, protest metal. Is that like a subgenre of metal, Cease? Political protest metal, personal politics, A
lot of metal in not in a like hit you over the head with it type of way, but like Anthrax was very political, and their songs about the homeless and their songs about inequality, racial inequality. They got a ton of songs like that. So it wasn't like in your face, hit you over the head,
personal,
but it was very, very personal, and it had a fantastic tone to it.
Yeah. So, we're not going to take it and fight for your right to party. I mean, those two songs around that time in my life, is like a 9, 10-year, 11-year-old adolescent, pre-adolescent boy, the protest. But it's carnival time here in New Orleans, and Mardi Gras is the ultimate block party. Like a whole city comes out to have a block party, and you run out like a crazy person after afloat and try to grab something. But and it's just the most festive time. James Booker, and there's a fantastic documentary called Bayou Maharaja about James Booker. Highly recommend it. A true one-off character in music. Was maybe the heir to someone like Jelly Roll Morton, but also his soul was turbulent. Left a lot of recordings out there. When he would go to Europe, he was received like some sort of god or honored guest, because that New Orleans music made it over to Europe, and it really grabbed people in a way that here you might see him at the Maple Leaf at a tiny bar. Anyway, this is a live album from, I think, Montreux. No, Zurich, Switzerland. And it's one of the only records I have, Cease, that actually was, it's rare, hard to find. Kate got it for me for, I don't remember exactly, anniversary, something like that. Because we came here to New Orleans, and there was a record player in the place we were staying, and they had some records, including that record. And I think James Booker was one of the Siren Song singers that brought us here. So highly recommend it, everybody.
I just want to be greeted like C-3PO was greeted when the Ewoks saw him in Endor. And that's how we roll, from James Booker to Wicket. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's a wrap for today's Audible. Again, I'm going to be at the Combine. Check us out on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom, at Cecil Lammey, at The Audible. He's Sigmund, I'm Cecil. We're The Audible. Stay tuned and stay frosty.